A single word can be a weapon. For Damien Thorne, the richest man in New York, words were his ammunition, and he just aimed them at the wrong person. He was a billionaire who saw people as pawns. She was a waitress he tried to break. He told her she was worthless, had her fired, and walked away without a second thought, laughing. But he forgot one thing. New York is a city of secrets, and the waitress he crushed was about to be the guest of honor at his own $1 million charity gala. His world is about to shatter. The hiss of the espresso machine at Le Ciel Bleu was the soundtrack to Elara Vance's life. It was a constant, steaming reminder of the gulf between her reality and her dreams. At 24, her hands that were trained to fly across the fingerboard of a violin to coax passionate sonatas from seasoned wood, were now stained with coffee grounds and chapped from harsh detergents. Le Ciel Bleu wasn't just a restaurant, it was a stage for the New York elite. Perched on the 61st floor of a glass and steel monolith, it offered panoramic views of Central Park and a menu where the appetizers cost more than Elara's weekly groceries. She navigated this world with a quiet, practiced invisibility. She smiled, she poured, she cleared, and she endured the casual, unthinking cruelty of people who had never known a day of want. Her life wasn't supposed to be this way. She had been a prodigy, the youngest student accepted into a prestigious pre-conservatory program at Juilliard. Her violin, a beautiful 19th century Italian piece gifted by her late father, was her voice. But fate had been cruel. 3 years ago, just as her career was about to launch, her younger brother, Leo, had been diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy, a rare, aggressive heart condition. Their parents were gone. Elara was all Leo had. She dropped out of school. She sold her belongings. She moved them from their decent apartment into a cramped, 4th-floor walk-up in Queens, and she took the job at Le Ciel Bleu, the high-end tips being the only thing that could make a dent in the mountain of medical debt. This particular Tuesday was heavier than most. Leo, now 13, was back in the hospital. The doctors at Lenox Hill had been grim. His heart was weakening. The transplant list was long, and his rare blood type made it longer. There was one hope, an experimental treatment, a new form of cardiac support bridge being pioneered by a Dr. Isabella Rossi. It was revolutionary. It was also prohibitively expensive, and insurance deemed it elective. Elara, Table 7 needs their check, and stop staring out the window, snapped Mr. Dubois, the maitre d', his voice as slick and cold as his pomaded hair. Sorry, Mr. Dubois. Elara blinked, the park far below blurring as she focused. She walked back into the dining room, a symphony of clinking glasses, hushed boasts, and the scent of truffle oil. Table 7 was a group of finance wives, draped in Cartier, dissecting a friend's divorce with surgical precision. As she ran the credit card, her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. A text from Leo. Super Leo is bored, need reinforcements. And maybe that mac and cheese from the hospital cafe? A small, genuine smile touched her lips. He was a good kid. He was a fighter. She typed back. Reinforcements inbound after my shift. Hold the fort, superhero. Love you. Miss? A woman at Table 7 snapped her fingers. We're ready. Of course, Mrs. Davenport. My apologies. Elara handed back the black card, her smile perfectly fixed, her heart 1,000 miles away in a sterile hospital room. She was so focused on Leo, so wrapped in the hum of her own anxiety, that she didn't even notice the man who had just walked in. The man whose arrival silenced the room. The man who owned the building. Damien Thorne. Damien Thorne didn't just enter a room. He conquered it. At 38, he was the archetypal self-made billionaire, a tech titan who had built Thorn Dynamics from a garage algorithm into a global empire. He was also, by all accounts, a ruthless, cold, and devastatingly charming monster. He was tall, dressed in a custom Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Ilara's brother's last hospital stay, and his eyes, the color of glacial ice, swept the room with an air of profound boredom. He was not in a good mood. A multi-billion-dollar semiconductor deal in Shanghai had just collapsed, and the failure had made him look weak. He was flanked by 2 lawyers, both scrambling to keep up with his long, angry strides. "Dubois," Damien barked, not even looking at the maitre d'. "My table, now, and 2 bottles of the 82 Margot. Don't bill me." "Of course, Mr. Thorne. Right this way, sir." Dubois was practically bowing. They were seated in the private alcove, the best table, overlooking the glittering skyline. Ilara's section. "Mr. Dubois," Ilara whispered, intercepting him near the service station. "Could Chloe take that table? My shift ends in 20, and I have to get to the hospital." Dubois looked at her as if she'd just asked to borrow his teeth. "Absolutely not. This is Damien Thorne. This is the table. You are my most composed waitress. You will take this table, you will be flawless, and you will not breathe a word of your domestic issues. Do you understand, Miss Vance?" Ilara's shoulders slumped. "Yes, Mr. Dubois." She approached the table, water pitcher in hand. The 2 lawyers looked terrified. Damien Thorne was staring at his phone, his thumb swiping angrily. "And I told them," he was snarling into his phone, "liquidate the entire position. I don't care about the penalty. I want them ruined by morning. Call the Journal. Give them an anonymous tip. Burn it all down." He clicked the phone off and tossed it onto the table. It slid and struck the base of a water glass. "Good evening, gentlemen," Ilara said, her voice soft. "May I offer you some water? We have still or sparkling." Damien didn't look up. "Heard of it," he muttered. "Bring the wine, now." One of the lawyers, the younger one, cleared his throat. "I'll have a sparkling water, please. Thank you." Ilara nodded and began to pour. As she reached for the lawyer's glass, Damien suddenly slammed his hand on the table, making her jump. "That's the problem," he roared, not at her, but at his legal team. "You were too soft. You let them walk all over you. This entire deal fell apart because of your complete and utter incompetence." "Sir, the regulatory hurdles were—" the older lawyer began. "Excuses," Damien spat. He gesticulated wildly, his hand sweeping backward, right as Ilara was pouring the water. His hand struck the heavy glass pitcher. The ice-cold water didn't just spill, it erupted. It sheeted across the table, drenching the $50,000 Hermes briefcase one lawyer had foolishly left open, and soaking a stack of vital, signed documents. Silence. The restaurant froze. Ilara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, Damien Thorne looked down. He saw the water pooling on the ancient wood. He saw the ink on his contracts bleeding. He saw his $2,000 silk tie, now dark with water. And then, slowly, he raised his head. His icy eyes locked on Ilara. She wasn't a person to him. She was just the final, inconvenient detail in a very, very bad day. "You," he said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "You clumsy, worthless. Nothing." "Sir, it was an accident. Do you have any idea what you just did?" he hissed, rising slowly from his chair. The lawyers shrank back. "These papers, they were my entire Asia-Pacific strategy. Do you know what they're worth?" I can get towels," Ilara stammered, tears of pure panic springing to her eyes. "Towels?" He let out a short, barking laugh. "Towels. She thinks towels will fix it." He stepped closer, towering over her. "Look at me. She forced herself to meet his gaze. "This," he said, gesturing to the restaurant, "is the peak of your existence. Your entire life's ambition is to not spill things on people better than you. And you can't even do that. You are a footnote, a pathetic, forgettable, minimum wage mistake." "Mr. Thorne, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I have to go." "You have to go," he repeated, his voice dripping with venom. "Go where? To another dead-end job? To a tiny apartment you can't afford? Let me give you some advice, sweetheart. People like you don't have places to be. You are just the background noise in our lives." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a $100 bill, and crumpled it. He threw it at her chest. It bounced off her apron and landed in the puddle on the floor. "That's for the damage to your dignity," he sneered. "Now get out of my sight." Elara just stood there, paralyzed, tears streaming down her face. "Dubois!" Damien roared. Mr. Dubois scurried over. "Mr. Thorne, I am mortified. This is inexcusable." "She's fired," Damien said simply, sitting back down and pulling out a cigar. "I don't want to see her face again. And bring me my wine, the other bottle." "But, Mr. Thorne, I need this job," Elara pleaded, the words torn from her throat. Leo's face flashed in her mind. The medical bills, the experimental treatment. Dubois grabbed her arm, his fingers biting into her skin. "You heard the man, Miss Vance. You're done. Get your things. Go." He dragged her away from the table. Damien Thorne didn't even watch her leave. He was already lighting his cigar, the blue-grey smoke obscuring his face as he planned his next move. Elara stumbled into the staff locker room, ripped off her apron, and fled, the sound of her own sobs swallowed by the sterile quiet of the service elevator. She had been erased. The next 3 weeks were a blur of escalating desperation. Being fired for cause from a place like Le Ciel Bleu, especially at the behest of Damien Thorne, meant she was blacklisted. No other high-end restaurant would touch her. She applied for diners, for coffee shops, for fast food. She was either overqualified, or they weren't hiring. Her meager savings evaporated. The rent check bounced. An eviction notice, stark and orange, was taped to her apartment door. But none of that mattered as much as the phone call from Dr. Isabella Rossi. "Elara," Dr. Rossi said, her voice kind but firm. Elara was sitting on the floor of the hospital corridor, having just been turned away from Leo's room for being late with a copay. "We can't wait any longer. Leo's condition is deteriorating. This experimental treatment, the Vance Bridge, it's his only viable option to make it to transplant. We need to start it, or we need to move to palliative care." Palliative care. The words sucked the air from Elara's lungs. "How much?" Elara whispered, her knuckles white as she gripped the phone. "How much to start?" "The initial procedure and the first 2 weeks of monitoring. It's $50,000, Elara. That's just the deposit." $50,000. It might as well have been 50 million. Elara hung up the phone, a dry, racking sob escaping her. She was failing him. Her pride, her pain at Damien Thorne's words. None of it mattered. Only Leo mattered. She walked home in a daze. The eviction notice on her door seemed to mock her. She let herself into the tiny apartment. It was cold. The heat had been shut off. Her eyes landed on the one beautiful thing left in her life. In the corner, gleaming in the weak afternoon light, was her violin case. She walked over to it, her feet leaden. She unclipped the worn brass latches. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark blue velvet, was her instrument. It was her past. It was her future. It was her father's last gift. It was her soul. She picked it up, the wood warm against her chin. She hadn't played in weeks. Her fingers found their old places on the strings. She drew the bow, and a single, heartbreaking note from a Bach partita filled the empty room. It was a note of such profound sorrow that it felt like a physical wound. She played for an hour, the music a torrent of her rage, her grief, and her terror. She played for Leo. She played for the dreams she'd lost. When she finished, the room was dark. Her tears had dried on the violin's varnish. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, she took the subway to 48th Street, to the row of music shops. She didn't go to the fine dealers. She didn't have time for appraisals and commissions. She went to a dusty, cluttered shop known for quick, cash-for-instrument deals. The owner, a man named Mr. Gelman, peered at the violin over his spectacles. "It's a beautiful copy," he said, his voice gravelly. "Not a real one, you understand, but a fine workshop, probably Italian, late 19th century. Good tone, I imagine." "It has a perfect tone," Ilara said, her voice hollow. "These, they don't move fast. Collectors want the big names. Players want new. I'll give you 3,000. 3,000? Ilara felt sick. It has to be worth 60. 70 at least. To you, maybe. To me, it's shelf space. Look, kid, I like you. You look like you're in trouble. 5,000. That's my final offer. Cash." Ilara looked at the violin. She thought of Leo's smile, his stupid Super Leo drawings. You don't have places to be. You are just the background noise. Damien Thorne's voice. He was wrong. She did have a place to be. She was her brother's keeper. "I'll take it," she whispered. She watched him place the violin on a shelf, next to a dusty saxophone and a stack of old sheet music. He counted out 50 $100 bills. The cash felt dirty, obscene. She didn't take the subway. She ran, clutching the envelope, all the way from Midtown to Lenox Hill Hospital. She didn't have 50,000, but she had 5,000. It was a start. She burst into Dr. Rossi's office, out of breath, her hair wild. "Here," she panted, throwing the envelope on the desk. "It's 5,000. It's all I have. Please, you have to save him. Please, just start." Dr. Rossi looked at the cash, then at Ilara's face, streaked with sweat and tears. She saw the raw desperation, the absolute, bottomless well of a sister's love. "Ilara," Dr. Rossi began, her own voice thick with emotion. "Where did you get this?" "I sold my violin," Ilara said, her voice finally breaking. It was all I had left. Please, tell me it's enough." Dr. Rossi stood up. She didn't touch the money. She walked around the desk and put her hands on Ilara's shoulders. "It's enough, Ilara," she said softly. "It's more than enough. We'll start today. I'll handle the billing department. We'll figure out the rest later." Dr. Rossi looked at the young woman who had just sold her soul for her brother. And in that moment, the doctor made a decision. She was tired of fighting billing departments too. She was tired of seeing good people like Ilara broken by a heartless system. She knew about the upcoming Heartlight Gala, a massive, obscene fundraiser for her own department, hosted by some tech billionaire. She had been asked to speak, to present her research. She had just found her +1 and her new keynote speaker, while Ilara was selling the last piece of her identity. Damien Thorne was in his penthouse, a 3-story glass box overlooking Central Park, arguing about the color of napkins. "I said, 'Midnight blue, Genevieve,'" he sighed, rubbing his temples. "Not a navy, not azure. Midnight. Does no one understand simple instructions?" Genevieve, his high-strung, perpetually stressed-out event planner, looked like she was about to cry. "Mr. Thorne, the vendor calls this midnight blue. It's the darkest shade they have before black." "Then find another vendor," Damien said, waving her away. "I don't care what it costs." He turned to his assistant, Arthur Chen, a sharp, composed man who was the only person on Earth Damien halfway trusted. "Arthur, the Gala. Tell me about the money." "It's good," Arthur said, adjusting his glasses. "The Heartlight Gala has already raised 12 million in table sales. Your opening pledge of 5 million brings us to 17. We'll easily clear 20 million tonight." "Good," Damien said, staring out the window. "A new record. Make sure the Times knows it's a new record." "Of course. And, sir, Dr. Rossi's office called again." Damien frowned. "The doctor? The one who's speaking?" "Yes, she was insistent. She's changing her presentation. She said she's no longer just presenting data. She's bringing a case study. A young woman whose brother is a patient." Damien shrugged. "Fine. Whatever. As long as it's moving. Sad stories make rich people open their wallets. Is my speech ready?" "On your desk, sir. It highlights your mother's personal battle with heart disease." Damien's face tightened. He walked over to his desk, a slab of minimalist concrete, and picked up a small, silver, heart-shaped locket. It had been his mother's. She had died, poor and exhausted, in a public hospital when he was 19. He had sworn then that he would conquer the world, that he would become so powerful, so rich, that money would never be the reason he lost someone again. This gala, this entire hospital wing he was funding, it was all for her. It was his monument to her, and yet he felt empty. He'd built his empire. He'd crushed his enemies. He had everything. And he was standing in a $100 million apartment, utterly, profoundly alone, arguing about napkins. "Sir?" Arthur asked, his voice hesitant. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Arthur. Just get Genevieve out of my house and call Cartier. I need a gift for Senator Rawlings's wife. Something shiny." Arthur nodded, but he watched his boss with a flicker of concern. Damien Thorne had built a fortress of wealth around himself, but the fortress had become a cage. He was so terrified of being the weak, poor boy who watched his mother die that he had become a man incapable of feeling anything at all. He had no memory, none whatsoever, of a trembling waitress in a French restaurant. He had no idea that the case study Dr. Rossi was bringing was the same girl he had crushed on his way out the door. He had thrown away a human being, and it hadn't even registered. He picked up the speech. Philanthropy, it began, is not just about writing checks. It's about empathy. It's about connecting with our shared humanity. He scoffed, tossed the papers back on the desk and buzzed his tailor. His suit wasn't fitting right in the shoulders. That was a real problem. The American Museum of Natural History was transformed. The Heartlight Gala was not at a hotel. It was in the Milstein Hall of Ocean Life, under the shadow of the 94-foot-long blue whale. The cavernous room was bathed in a deep, pulsing red light, meant to evoke the human heart. Tables draped in midnight blue. Genevieve had found the right vendor, glittered with crystal. New York's wealthiest citizens, hedge fund managers, real estate tycoons, old money matriarchs, mingled, their diamonds competing with the flashing cameras. Damien Thorne was at the center of it all, a king in his court. He was flawless in a custom tuxedo, shaking hands, accepting praise, his smile practiced and empty. "Damien, marvelous job." "Simply marvelous," chirped a woman whose face was pulled terrifyingly tight. "It's for a good cause, Elizabeth," he said, already looking over her shoulder for the Forbes photographer. In a quiet corner near the service entrance, Elara Vance was having a panic attack. I can't do this, Dr. Rossi," she whispered, her hands shaking. She was wearing a simple, floor-length black dress donated by a charity that provided professional clothing. It was elegant, but it felt like a costume. "Yes, you can, Ilara," Dr. Rossi said, squeezing her hand. "You're not here for them. You're here for Leo. You're here for every family who has to choose between their rent and their child's life. You are not a case study. You are a witness. Just tell your story. Tell them the truth." "The truth?" Ilara said, a bitter laugh escaping her. "The truth is that the man hosting this entire event, the one they're all celebrating, he's the one who got me fired. He's the one who told me I was worthless while my brother was dying." Dr. Rossi froze. "What? You mean Damien Thorne?" Ilara nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "He doesn't know. He wouldn't remember me. I was just the background noise." Dr. Rossi's compassionate face hardened. A spark of cold, righteous anger ignited in her eyes. "Well," she said, her voice low, "he's about to find out how loud the background noise can be. This changes everything." "What? No, Dr. Rossi, I can't." "You're not going to," the doctor said, a fierce smile on her face. "You're just going to tell your story exactly as you planned. But I am going to handle your introduction. Stay here. Don't move." Dr. Rossi strode out onto the floor, her white lab coat a stark contrast to the sea of black tie. She found Genevieve, the event planner. "There's a change to the program," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "I'm speaking before my guest, not after. But Mr. Thorne is about to." "Now," Dr. Rossi said. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Damien, who had been laughing with the senator, looked up in annoyance. This was not on the schedule. Genevieve hurried to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, a brief update to our program. Please welcome to the stage the head of the Cardiac Research Wing and the pioneer of the Vance Bridge technology, Dr. Isabella Rossi." Polite applause. Damien crossed his arms, tapping his foot. Dr. Rossi stepped up to the podium. She looked out at the sea of faces, at the diamonds, at the whale, and finally, at Damien Thorne. "Good evening," she said, her voice ringing with clarity. "Thank you for coming. You've all given so much," she said, with just a hint of an edge. "You're here tonight to fund a new wing, to save lives. You're here to celebrate philanthropy. But philanthropy is a Greek word. It means love of mankind. It's not love of PR. It's not a tax write-off." A nervous cough rippled through the crowd. Damien's smile faltered. "I was supposed to show you charts tonight," Dr. Rossi continued. "Data, projections. But data doesn't have a pulse. So instead, I want to talk about what real sacrifice looks like. I want to introduce you to a young woman. She is one of the strongest people I have ever met. Her brother Leo is 13. He needs a new heart. And our new treatment, the one you're funding tonight, is the only thing keeping him alive." The crowd murmured, touched. This was the kind of story they'd come for. "But this treatment is expensive." Dr. Rossi's voice grew hard. "And this young woman, his sister, had no one. She was working 60 hours a week as a waitress to pay his bills, until one day, a few weeks ago, she was fired. She was fired for no reason by a man who decided she was worthless. He insulted her, he humiliated her, and he had her thrown out. He didn't know or care that his casual cruelty was a death sentence for her brother." The room was tomb silent. Damien Thorne uncrossed his arms. A cold dread, formless and prickling, was climbing his spine. "This woman," Dr. Rossi said, "lost her job. She lost her apartment. She had nothing left. So to get the $5,000 deposit for her brother's life, she sold the only thing she had left in the world, A violin, a gift from her late father, her dream, her soul. That, ladies and gentlemen, is philanthropy. That is the love of mankind. She locked eyes with Damien. And I thought you should all meet her. The guest I'd like to welcome to the stage tonight is Miss Ilara Vance. And the man who had her fired, is her host tonight, Mr. Damien Thorne. The gasp was a physical thing. Every single person in that room, every senator, every banker, every journalist, snapped their heads to look at Damien. The spotlight swung off Dr. Rossi and panned to the side of the stage. And into the light, pale but resolute, walked Ilara Vance. For Damien Thorne, the world didn't just stop, it evaporated. The hushed whispers of the crowd, the clicking of cameras, the massive silent wail overhead, it all dissolved into a high-pitched ringing in his ears. He saw her. It wasn't instant recognition. At first, she was just a woman, a face. And then, his memory, cruel and photographic, superimposed the image. The plain black uniform, the terror in her eyes, the sound of the water pitcher hitting the table, the crumpled $100 bill on the wet floor. "Get out of my sight!" His blood ran cold. It wasn't possible. This was a setup, a nightmare. But then Ilara stepped up to the microphone, her hands shaking so hard she had to grip the sides of the podium. She looked small, a speck of black against the vast, pulsing red backdrop. She didn't look at Damien. She couldn't. She looked out, over the heads of the stunned audience, to the dark exit sign at the back of the hall. She pictured Leo. I wasn't going to say this," she began, her voice a fragile, trembling whisper. The mic screeched with feedback. She flinched. She took a deep breath. And she tried again, her voice stronger. "I wasn't going to say his name, because this isn't about him. It's about my brother. It's about what's real." Damien was frozen. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He could feel the eyes of his entire world on him. They weren't looking at him as a titan, a billionaire, a philanthropist. They were looking at him as a monster. "My brother Leo, he loves superheroes," Ilara continued, her voice gaining warmth as she thought of him. "He draws them all the time. He calls himself Super Leo. He thinks I'm the strong one. But I wasn't. 3 weeks ago, when I lost my job, I wanted to give up." A tear traced a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. "I was told I was worthless, that I was background noise, by Mr. Thorne, and the worst part is, I believed him. For a minute, I believed him. When you're that powerful, your words have weight. Your words can kill." Damien's throat closed. He thought of his own words. "Burn it all down. I want them ruined." He had said them just that day. He had said them at the restaurant. "You are a footnote, a pathetic, forgettable, minimum wage mistake." "But my brother, he kept fighting," Ilara said, her voice rising. "So I had to. I had nothing left to sell, except my father's violin. It was my dream. I was going to be a musician." She told the story. The pawn shop, Mr. Gelman, the 5,000, the run to the hospital, the feel of the empty, cold apartment without the violin in the corner. "I sold my past," she said, her voice cracking, "so my brother could have a future. Dr. Rossi, she saved him. She took that $5,000 and she performed a miracle. I'm not a philanthropist. I'm just a sister. I'm just here to ask you. Please, don't let people like my brother, or families like mine, be the background noise in your lives. Thank you," she finished. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so complete that the hum of the ventilation system sounded like a roar. Damien Thorne stood alone in the center of the room. He felt dissected. Every lie he had ever built his life on, that he was a good man, that this gala meant something, that he was honoring his mother. It had all been ripped away. He had become the very thing he hated, a person who used power to crush the weak. His mother had died because of a system that was cold and indifferent. He had just become that system. Ilara's story about selling her violin, her soul, for someone she loved. He reached into his pocket. His fingers didn't find his phone. They found the small, heart-shaped locket. His mother's locket. He clutched it. Ilara's sacrifice. His mother's sacrifice. And his empty, soulless performance. He wasn't just embarrassed. He wasn't just exposed. He was broken. And that's when it happened. In the middle of the Milstein Hall of Ocean Life, in front of the New York Times, in front of his board of directors, in front of the woman he had tried to destroy, Damien Thorne began to cry. It was not a dignified single tear. It was a silent, agonizing, body-racking collapse. He covered his face with his hands as the past 38 years of his life, the rage, the loss, the crushing loneliness of his golden cage, came crashing down. He saw his mother's face. He saw Ilara's, and he couldn't tell the difference. The sound that left him was a strangled sob. The room erupted. Cameras flashed, a wall of blinding light. People were shouting. Ilara, seeing him, just stared, her anger completely eclipsed by a profound, hollow shock. Arthur Chen, his assistant, rushed to his side. Sir, we have to go." Damien stumbled, letting Arthur guide him. He didn't look at anyone. He just let himself be led out of the hall, past the stunned faces of his guests, his shoulders shaking. He had been publicly, totally, and irrevocably shattered. Damien didn't stop in the green room. He pushed past the security guards, out the service exit, and into the cold October night. The sirens of the city felt like an accusation. "Sir! Mr. Thorne!" Arthur ran after him, grabbing his arm. "You can't just... We have to release a statement. We have to..." "What statement, Arthur?" Damien rasped, his voice raw. He leaned against the brick wall of the museum, the rough stone biting into his tuxedo. "What statement? I'm a monster. It's all true. Sir, we can spin this. A misunderstanding. A high-stress day. We'll..." "Stop." Damien held up a hand. He looked at Arthur, his eyes red-rimmed and terrifyingly clear. "Just... stop. Get my car. But don't handle this. Not yet." Arthur, seeing a new, dangerous sincerity in his boss, simply nodded. "Yes, sir." Inside, the gala was in chaos. Genevieve was hyperventilating. The guests were clustered, whispering, a feeding frenzy of gossip. Ilara was standing alone by the stage, Dr. Rossi by her side, fielding questions from a Times reporter. Miss Vance, how do you feel about Mr. Thorne's reaction?" I don't," Ilara said honestly. "I didn't come here to do that. I just wanted to talk about my brother." "Dr. Rossi, you knew. You deliberately exposed him," the reporter pressed. "I deliberately told the truth," Dr. Rossi corrected, her arms crossed. "The gala is a success. Leo Vance will get his treatment. That's all I care about. Now, if you'll excuse us." She steered Ilara away from the crowd, toward the coat check. "Let's get you back to the hospital, Ilara. Leo will be wanting to see you." As they were putting on their coats, a voice cut through the noise. "Wait." They turned. It was Damien Thorne. He had come back in. His face was pale, his $10,000 tuxedo was rumpled, and his eyes were raw. He looked smaller. "Dr. Rossi," he said, his voice hoarse. "Reporters, everyone, 1 minute. He walked not to the stage, but just into the center of the room. The whispers died. What Dr. Rossi said tonight was true, he said. The room held its breath. Every word of it. This was not what they expected. They expected denial, excuses. I did what I did. There is no excuse. I was arrogant and I was cruel. I have been for a very long time. He looked, not at the crowd, but directly at Ilara. Miss Vance, he said, and the name felt foreign and heavy on his tongue. I can't apologize. An apology it's just a word. It's as worthless as the $100 bill I threw at you. Ilara flinched, the memory still a fresh wound. So I won't, he said. Instead, I'm going to make a promise. Arthur Chen, who had followed him in, stepped forward, his face grim, holding a tablet. As of right now, Damien announced, his voice gaining a sliver of its old command. Thorne Dynamics is transferring $100 million to the Lenox Hill Cardiac Wing, not as a pledge, as a wire transfer. Done. A collective, massive gasp. Second, he continued, I am establishing a new foundation, the Leo Vance Foundation. Its sole purpose will be to cover 100% of all medical and living expenses for every single family in Dr. Rossi's experimental treatment program, indefinitely, so that no one, ever, has to sell their soul to save their child. Dr. Rossi's jaw dropped. And third, he said, his voice faltering again as he looked at Ilara. Third, this one is personal. He walked toward her. She instinctively took a step back, right into Dr. Rossi. He stopped, keeping a respectful distance. I can't give you back your time. I can't undo what I said, he said, his voice low for her alone. But I can find your violin. Ilara's head snapped up. What? I will find it, he said, a terrifying, familiar intensity returning to his eyes. But this time it wasn't for profit. It was for penance. I don't care what it costs. I don't care who has it. I will get it back. And I will get your old job back. Ilara finally found her voice. It was cold as steel. I don't want my old job, Mr. Thorne. Damien nodded, absorbing the hit. No, of course you don't. You're right. He looked lost. He had just thrown over $100 million at the problem, and it hadn't fixed the one thing in the room that mattered. Ilara looked at this man, this billionaire who had crumpled her life, and now he was the one who looked broken. She didn't feel triumph. She just felt tired. The foundation, she said. The Leo Vance Foundation. Yes, he said, grasping at the straw. I want to run it. Damien blinked. Arthur blinked. I don't understand. You don't know how, Ilara said simply. You know how to throw money. You don't know what it's like to be on the other side, to get the eviction notice, to choose which bill to pay. I do. If this Leo Vance Foundation is real, I run it. Not your lawyers, not your PR team. Me. I'll be the one who talks to the families. I'll be the one who cuts the checks, and my salary will be $50,000. It was a staggering, brilliant, and perfect checkmate. Damien Thorne looked at Ilara Vance, not the waitress, not the case study, but the leader, and for the first time in his life, he felt something akin to true, unadulterated respect. He bowed his head. Okay, he said. Yes, it's yours. The next 6 months were not a transition. They were an earthquake. The New York Times story, titled The Billionaire's Penance, Too Little, Too Late, had been merciless. It ran with a side-by-side, the paparazzi shot of Damien sobbing under the whale next to a grainy, unauthorized photo of Ilara's eviction notice. Thorne Dynamics stock plummeted by 24%. In the old days, this would have meant war. Damien would have been in his office for 72 hours straight, fueled by rage and coffee, orchestrating a brutal media counter-assault, destroying the reporter's career and buying back his own stock to short-squeeze his enemies. Instead, when his new and terrified board of directors assembled in his penthouse for an emergency meeting, they found him in a simple grey sweater, reading a book of poetry. "The stock, Mr. Thorne. It's a bloodbath." His CFO, a man named Patterson, had stammered, holding a tablet showing the plunging red lines. Damien had looked up from his book, marked his page, and said, "It's just paper, Patterson. It's not real. Let it burn. It'll come back, or it won't. I don't care." He resigned from the board of the Met. He resigned from the Lincoln Center Philharmonic. He vanished from the society pages. Damien Thorne, the man who had been the loudest, most aggressive force in New York, went silent. He put his penthouse up for sale and moved into a quiet, understated brownstone on the Upper West Side, a few blocks from the hospital. He spent his days walking, reading, and, for the first time, listening. But one piece of the old Damien remained, the relentless, obsessive predator. He had made a promise. His investigation, funded with an unlimited budget, tracked Ilara's violin from Mr. Gelman's shop to an auction, and then to a private collector in Geneva, Switzerland, a notoriously reclusive commodities trader named Antoine Leclerc. Damien flew to Geneva. He didn't send Arthur. He went himself. He was met in a private, climate-controlled vault, the violin case resting on a velvet table. Leclerc, a thin man with a reptilian smile, sneered, "Mr. Thorne, a pleasure. But as I told your assistant, the instrument is not for sale. It has a story, and I love stories." "I know," Damien said. He was calm. He was wearing a simple peacoat, and he looked more like a professor than a billionaire. "I know all about you. I know you've been trying to force a hostile takeover of Haley Maritime Logistics in Marseille for 3 years. Your last 2 attempts have failed." Leclerc's smile faltered. "What does that have to do with anything?" "My team and I acquired a 51% controlling interest in that company this morning while you were having your croissant," Damien said, placing a single file on the table. "It's yours. The entire company. The stock is being transferred to a holding account in your name as we speak. In exchange for the violin, you have until I finish this glass of water to decide." Leclerc, pale and shaking, looked from the file to the violin. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution, Thorne style. But the motive was entirely new. It's just a violin," Leclerc stammered. "No," Damien said, taking a sip of water. "It's a soul." 2 hours later, the violin was on a private jet, safely secured in the seat next to Damien. While Damien was dismantling his past, Ilara was building her future. The Leo Vance Foundation was her domain. Her small office at Lenox Hill was the nerve center of a quiet, powerful revolution. She was not the timid waitress. She was, as one nurse called her, a polite nightmare. "I understand it's against policy, Mr. Henderson," she said into her phone one afternoon, her voice calm but diamond hard. She was staring at a file for a new family, a single mother whose son needed the Vance Bridge. "But this is the Leo Vance Foundation. Our policy is that this child's mother doesn't have to choose between her car payment and her son's heart. So, you will approve the out-of-network coverage, or my next call will be to Damien Thorne's personal legal team, who will, and I quote, buy your entire company and turn it into a parking lot. Your choice." There was a sputtering on the other end, followed by a hasty agreement. Ilara smiled, hung up, and made a note. Approved. She had learned, brilliantly, how to weaponize the Thorne reputation for good. She was Saint Ilara to the families. She arranged for grocery delivery, paid for rent, and sat with parents during the long, terrifying surgeries. Most importantly, she sat with Leo. His treatment was a staggering success. The Vance Bridge was holding. He was stronger, his color was back, and he was officially at the top of the transplant list, waiting for the call. One cold Tuesday there was a knock on her office door. She looked up. It was Damien. She froze. She hadn't seen him in person since the gala. He looked different, thinner, quieter. The arrogance that had rolled off him in waves was gone, replaced by a deep, weary stillness. He was holding the old familiar violin case. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice soft. "Ilara, I asked your assistant if I could have a moment." "Mr. Thorne?" she replied. Her voice was steady, professional, guarded. "I'm busy." "I know, I just came to deliver this." He stepped in and placed the case on her desk. It lay between her laptop, her foundation spreadsheets, and a half-eaten salad, between her past and her present. Her hand went to her heart. She couldn't breathe. "Is it?" "It is," he said. I had it restored. The man who had it, he didn't keep it well. It's been cleaned, restrung. It's yours." Ilara stared at it. She was shaking. This was the one thing, the one wound she thought would never, ever heal. Slowly, her fingers found the worn brass latches. She unclipped them. The smell of aged wood, rosin, and velvet hit her like a physical blow. There it was, her father's gift, her soul. A tear she hadn't authorized spilled over and hit the desk. She wiped it away, angry. "How?" she whispered, her voice sharp. "How did you get it? What did it cost?" She was testing him. She needed to know if he was still the same monster. Damien didn't flinch. "I found the man who had it, and I made him an offer he couldn't refuse." "You bullied him," she stated, not a question. "Yes," he admitted. I bought a shipping firm he wanted and traded it to him." Ilara looked up, her eyes flashing with a familiar mix of anger and sorrow. "So you're still him. You still just move mountains and break things and buy people to get what you want." "No," Damien said, and his voice was so full of self-loathing that it stopped her. "No. The old me would have bought it to impress you. The old me would have held a press conference. I did this because it was the only piece of you I broke that I could actually fix. I can't undo the eviction. I can't take back what I said. That stays with me. This was just returning stolen property." He backed away, putting space between them. "Ilara, I'm stepping down as CEO of Thorne Dynamics," he said, jamming his hands into his pockets. "Arthur Chen is taking over. He's a good man. Better than me." This, she had not expected. "What?" "My only job, my only connection to the company, will be to fund this foundation. Your foundation. The money will be there, in perpetuity. You'll never have to ask for it. You will never have to see me again. You are free of me. I had to deliver this myself." He had done it. He had given her back her life, her brother's health, her past, her future, and now he was giving her his absence, the final, perfect gift. He nodded, a formal, pained gesture, and turned to leave. He was at the door, his hand on the knob. "Wait." He stopped, his back to her. "Leo," she said, her voice softer. He's stable. He's on the pre-transplant floor. He's laughing again. He's himself. That's..." Damien's voice was thick. That's wonderful news, Ilara. I'm so glad. He knows who you are, she said, a small, strange smile touching her lips. He calls you the Batman, the grumpy, rich money man who named a hospital wing after him. He thinks you're a superhero. Damien let out a sound that was half a laugh, half a sob. He didn't turn around. He's bored, Ilara continued, and he's been beating me, badly, at Mario Kart for a week. He asked me to invite you. He wants to show you his new room and, quote, destroy you on Rainbow Road. Damien slowly turned. His eyes were red, but he was smiling. A real smile. It changed his entire face. When? He whispered. Tomorrow, she said. 4 o'clock. If you're not too busy abdicating your empire. He let go of the doorknob. I'll be there, he said. I'm terrible at Mario Kart. You'll learn, Ilara said, a faint smile of her own finally appearing. Or you'll just buy Nintendo. We'll see. He nodded, holding her gaze for a moment longer. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't romance. It was something new, a tentative truce, an understanding. Thank you, Ilara, he said. And he left. Ilara Vance stood alone in her office. She looked at her spreadsheets, her new life, and she looked at the open violin case, her old one. She picked up the violin. It felt warm, familiar. She tucked it under her chin, her eyes closing. She drew the bow, and a single, pure note from a Bach partita filled the room. It wasn't a note of sorrow. It wasn't a note of victory. It was a note of rebuilding. It was the sound of a life starting over. Ilara Vance learned that a voice, no matter how quiet, can shatter a room full of noise. And Damien Thorne learned that wealth is worthless without empathy, and that true power isn't about how much you can take, but how much you can give back. Their story isn't just about a billionaire and a waitress. It's about the fact that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. It's a reminder that a simple act of cruelty or a simple act of kindness can change a life forever. What did you think of Damien's transformation? Was it real, or was Ilara right to be cautious? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more true life stories of karma and redemption. We're so grateful you're here. We'll see you in the next one.